Welcome, Chris Creations. I'm back, and we're back with a new printer. Well, some may say it's an old printer. This particular model is a new printer. It's a reinvented version of an older printer from Kingroon 3D, KLP1-230 V2. That's right, you heard it, -230 V2. So, what's new about it? What have they done to improve it? Is it still the, well, over-engineered printer that others have reviewed and had not so good a review about? Well, dive in, stay tuned, stick around. We'll go into it the way Chris does it, raw, straight up, real review, whether it's worth your bang for buck. Let's go, let's dive into it. Check it out. All right, so here we are, guys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. Basically, we've got the Kingroon KLP230. Those of you who are going to hear those words are going to be like, ooh, not that thing. Well, yes and no. Yes, I have seen some reviews on the KLP210. I've seen one or two from Fedor from the KLP230, which is the new edition, which I'm reviewing today. He did do an unboxing and a live stream on that, but he didn't touch on a lot of things that I'm going to touch on today, which is perfectly fine. He does things a little bit different than what I do. I dive into the nitty and gritty and what matters about what we want in printers, and he goes into the configuration process and the unboxing review and talks about that. So with that said and out the way and all done and dusted, what have we got here? Well, what I can say about this printer is this is a tank of a machine. What I mean by that, is it a tank? Well, it is heavy. It is plated steel. This is a complete steel frame, unlike the 210, which had the transparent perspex like this here, lid and front door mechanism. On the sides, they have now replaced that with solid molded metal, sheet metal paneling. I'll talk a bit about that very soon, a bit later on. One of the other things they've done, obviously, you've got the new knobs. They've got some new door hinges on there, opens and closes. They still haven't put a stop on the rear, but it does sit nicely there. There's no issue of that going to snap off. It's got some nice M6 nylock nuts on there, reinforced hinges, and the actual perspex tinted glass itself is quite rigid and solid, so that's a good thing as well. One of the other things it's got a direct drive extruder, cake style extruder with a 9:5:1 gear ratio. It has a ceramic hot end with a 60 watt element, I suppose you'd call it, with a high flow hot end, which is really good to hear and see. The fan that they're using on this seems to be a brushless oiled bearing variant of what I would say would be a 420 turbine fan, which gives you excellent cooling. I've done a bridge test on that, and an overall, I suppose, torture test, you'd say, on that, and I'll show you that very shortly. It actually exceeded my expectations. Quite surprisingly, I tested it. I do the torture test on a lot of other printers I do, including the K1 Max series from the Creality, the Bamboo printers, you know, the older printers as well. I mean, I've even got a CR10 Smart Pro behind me running on a Sonic pad. That's got dual 5015 turbine fans, which far exceeds the cooling capacity of this machine. But yet, all in all the same, because of the actual confinement space and the air volume structure of this printer, it actually exceeded the overhang print on that test print. So I was quite surprised with that, and I'll show you that very shortly. It does have linear rails on the X and Y motion, which is quite good. I prefer the linear rails over the linear rods. That gives you more rigidity, more accuracy as well. The bearings on them are a non-seal bearing, so you can actually re-grease them as you need them. They do come pre-lubed, which is good to see. One of the interesting things you'll notice about this printer, which we'll do a bit of a zoom up shortly, is it does have a single Z-axis on the bed for the Z height. That was quite unique, I must say, but it does have some very, very hefty 10mm solid, I say again solid, stainless steel linear rods that guide that Z-axis Z-rod up and down. And I have to admit, the build plate itself, although it only runs off two 10mm linear rods with a single Z-axis for the Z movement, height up and down, it's probably one of the most rigid build plates I've ever seen on a small volume. I say small volume being 230 by 230 by 210 in height. It's one of the most sturdy and strong, I'd probably say over-engineered build plates I've ever seen. The plate itself contains 8 spring-loaded mechanism screws that help level the bed off against a 3.5mm plate that's actually a box plate reinforced that actually is mounted to the actual 10mm dual linear rods. This thing cannot flex at all. It is so rock solid. So, I mean, if you're talking about things people complain a lot about is, you know, with the induction sensors and the CR touch probes and, you know, the different beds you have with magnetic beds on the corexy printers, lead known bed slingers. This bed is surprisingly very level, very strong. I mean, I kid you not, you could probably put if you could fit it in there, you could probably put a 15 to 20 kilo weight plate on there and it wouldn't even flex. I was really shocked by that. Yeah, you've probably seen some close-up videos of that as well on the intro. It is very solid and it has a very good spring-loaded mechanism for the bed leveling. Now, it does have, they have done away with the probe style CR touch and sensor probe, a mechanical sensor probe, and they've gone with a inductive electronic sensor probe. Now, people, like most people, are going to say, oh, that's a bit of an issue. What about heat soak and all those sorts of things? Look, to be honest, a lot of printing companies are going down that road, and I think it's more to do with the fact of the accuracy. People will say, oh, they fail this and they fail that. But I think the biggest reason is with the build volume, they're looking at scaling back certain points of value that don't directly impact the leveling system. Now, if you look at the probe on this, I'm not sure the actual brand. I'll bring up a photo. I've got some photos of the actual cover with the whole extrusion system, with the bed leveling probe and the heater, HotEnd and heater block. And that photo will be here. Probably put both of them up side by side, to be honest. And what you'll notice is that with these probes, even the Omron ones and other ones you can get from different companies that are, you know, more well regarded, like the Omron and other ones that are the higher end quality brands of those inductive sensors, they're not very dear. I mean, to replace the whole sensor, you're probably looking at around $6 to $9 US, if that. So that said, you know, compare that to, say, a CR touch or a mechanical pressure probe, which you're looking at around, you know, 25 to 35 US. That's a big difference. I mean, you could potentially buy 4 of those electronic probes and, you know, have a lifetime of bed measuring probes that, you know, you're never going to have an issue with. So I can see why they're doing that as well. They have updated with this 230 as well, from the 210. They've updated the actual extrusion mechanism. So before they had the planetary gears in there, they had some issues with play in the bigger gear ratio, having some slop against the internal planetary gear drive that actually extrudes and pressurizes the filament into the actual heating block for the HotEnd. And that's now been resolved now with some different gears and a different size planetary gear. And it also has a spring-loaded mechanism which can tension as well, the actual gear against the actual feeding gear itself, which is quite a good thing. So that is a really good thing. One thing I will say that is a drawback with this design, I will say that this printer overall is what I would say over-engineered, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I just feel that some of the components that they've gone with this printer are so heavy duty and industrial, which is great to a certain degree, and other areas are a little bit lacking, which we'll discuss, and I'll show you the reasons why, and I'll point out I suppose it doesn't affect the printing, but it does affect the experience and the noise and calibration processes and so on. So we'll go into that later on. Apart from that, it's got great cooling, like I said. Bed level adhesion is not a problem. You do have this lid here with the Perspex lid, which is great, although once again, like a lot of corexy printers, companies are failing to realize that, you know, the PDFE tube and the actual power unit cable from the motherboard underneath the machine that feeds into the extruder mechanism that powers everything, there is a cable zip tie on there to prevent that from, you know, drifting and potentially wearing out the connection. But obviously, as you can see, there isn't a riser for that, so you're going to have potential rub on there. Now, if you are printing something like a more coarse or filament, like a PLA carbon fiber, a PETG carbon fiber, or even a nylon or anything like that, you will find that, you know, potentially that could break off inside. You know, so, I mean, this is not so much a Kingroon problem. It's an industry problem as it is, where a lot of companies aren't really, you know, looking at the longevity of the printer. They're just saying, oh, no, that's fine. It'll rub across there. It won't be a big deal. Look, there is plenty of printables out there. You can print the risers for them, as I've done in the past with other corexy printers. It's not a big deal, but it would be nice if they could just do that. Getting back to the over-engineering side, you can see there is a mountain of screws in here, which is crazy. Even underneath, I think I counted something like 28 or something hex 3mm screws, which is unbelievable. The cooling fan system at the bottom is fantastic. It's the 230 machine is actually running the new Cheetah V2.2 board, which is awesome. It has the silent stepper motors in it, has the SD card connection, trans flash card connection. It has your Type C USB input. It even has a HDMI output, which I'll show you the photo here of the diagram of the actual motherboard component showing all the connection points as well. As to what this printer is capable of doing, this printer can print everything from PLA, PLA+, TPU, PETG, you know, your ABSs, your ASAs, all those sort of materials. You can even print, you know, your PLA carbon fiber, PETG carbon fiber. No issue there. Like I said, it does have the ceramic hot end. It does come with a hardened steel nozzle, which is great. There's no brass nozzle, which is, you know, okay, but I think it's good that it doesn't have one. That's good to see. So if you're doing your abrasive filaments, you're not going to have a problem there. One of the things I did notice is it's not a full length hardened steel nozzle, so it's not even as long as a spider nozzle. It's more of just your normal 3.5 MK8S nozzle, you know, 5mm in length, and it does depend purely on the actual ceramic heating core to heat that up as well. So it's not too much of an issue, but, you know, that could be improved, but so far I haven't had a problem with that at all. It feeds well, it melts very, very well, it heats up quite quick, and I've had no problems with under extrusion with that as well, so that's been good as well. As you can see on the side of this model, I've actually already put some add-ons on there. Now, basically, you know, I put these add-ons on there just because I wanted to get the full experience of what this unit could offer. Now, for further disclosure, just so everyone's aware, I actually paid for this unit myself. Some people will think you're crazy, some people think you won't. I approached Kingroon 3D and I wanted to, you know, look at providing a context on a printer that not necessarily had been reviewed that well. And I thought that I could do a better job at just getting the context of what this printer is about out to you guys and women and ladies and gentlemen, you know, as to what it can do, what the capabilities are, the pitfalls, downfalls, and what the positives are as well. Thus the reason why I got the side spool holder, which does come with a bearing kit as well, which is quite stable. It comes with a PDFI filament feeder with the PTFE tube grommet, which is spring-loaded, which is great. It mounts onto the factory 3mm hex nuts, which are bolts, which is great as well. One of the biggest things I will say that does annoy me somewhat is the filament sensor on the back. Now, I have thought long and hard about this. I have had this printer for about a month now, a little bit over a month. I took a lot of time. I had a lot of things going on, and I took a lot of time to really get to know this printer because I really wanted to understand why it was made the way it was and what it can do. And the only thing that really gives me grief is that the filament sensor on the back. I have looked at the fact that the filament sensor, what it is it's fixed mounted to the back, and I'll show you a picture of it just here, and you'll see what I'm talking about, is that the PDFA tube that runs out the back, as you can see here, from the actual extruder mechanism in through the top, is that it runs into the right-hand side back section of the filament sensor, but it doesn't actually feed into anything like it would if it had one of these PDFA grommet locks. It just rests against it, and the filament that comes either if you've got the back spool mounted or you've got the extra accessory side spool mount there that feeds in through this feeder with the tube that goes along, it literally just is fed through the other side of this filament sensor, which you'll see in the photo. By what I mean is that it feeds in from the left and to the right and just sort of sits against it. There's no way of locking that filament sensor in. That and the fact that there's no way of relocating that sensor. Now, I have noticed that the actual connection point for the runout sensor on the back is similar to the inputs on other filament sensors that you can buy from Creality and Sovol and things like that. So I am going to try out, I do have a spare sensor for one of my Ender 3 V3s, so I am going to try out that sensor just to see if that sensor is compatible and actually triggers and works. That would be fantastic. And then the other option would be to get an extension for the short lead so that you could run the filament sensor off to the side, and that way you've got a better location to feed it. That's probably the biggest flaw on this entire printer. Those of you who have had the KLP1 210 or the 230 version 1, which the difference between that and this one, the V2, is the V2 has the upgraded extrusion mechanism, which has a slightly different inductive probe for the bed mesh leveling, and I think the extruder drive gears are slightly different as well. So that's the difference between that. So apart from that, like I said, it does do up to 500 millimeters a second, although the recommended speed is 250 to 300. It is compatible with basically all slices. It is fully open software, and it does run Clipper. It is full Clipper, although Kingroon don't have any firmware Clipper variant, I suppose, firmware upgrades. It is an open source platform, so I'm hoping to see somewhere through GitHub that someone's looked into potentially upgrading the Clipper firmware for the KLP1 230. Some of the features it is missing, although you can utilize main, say on fluid through Moonraker, is the ability to have the integration of using the camera, which you can purchase optionally with this, although it is a 720p camera. You can, would be to have the sensor detect whether there's a printer fail or stringing or issue there. I'm yet to see that in the macro files. I'm possibly sure you could edit that in somehow in the G coding, but that's not my speciality. So yeah, one of the other things you'll notice it doesn't come with an LED light. I purchased that separately. Like I said, I paid for this from Kingroon 3D. They did know I was going to do a review on this printer, although because I'm not, you know, a big enough, I would say, 3D printing review channel and enthusiast, I did pay for it myself. I did not get extra filament with it, but I will be using some high-speed filament to do some testing, which you'll see in a moment. But like I said, I did purchase the camera myself, as well as the LED light. A bit disappointing with the LED light that it's just connected to the main board power source on the printer. There's no way of turning that on and off within the actual system presets. We'll go through the system presets and I'll show you the touchscreen. It does come with a stylus. As you can see there, I printed a little stylus holder just to pop on the front there. Makes it easier, have somewhere to put it. You get your usual in the box. You get a spare spare PDFE tube for rerouting your filament. You get your standard little makeshift little spanner and your Allen keys. You do get a spare hardened steel nozzle, which is great. And you also get your classic nifty little filament cutters and your nozzle probe as well. So one of the other things, two other things you actually get is you get a USB Type-C cable, which is great for plugging into the main board. Like I said, I'll go through the main board features very soon. You can check that out. The standard USB comes with the firmware files. It also comes with the Orca preset profiles, which is great too. So one of the things you can do is obviously with that, you can modify the G code and you could use that through Cura. Obviously with full Clipper experience and Moonraker using mainsail, fluid, Octoprint, whatever you want to use, you can transfer those files across. You can use Cura as well as Orca. You obviously use Prusa slicers as well if that's your variant. And then on top of that, you do get a maker base with SD to MKS EMC adapter too as well for flashing those. So, that's what you get in the box. Obviously, you get your little manual there as well, which details a little bit of information about the slicer and the configuration information and the settings guide, which is handy. I was surprised that the actual printer manual itself does have a quite good explanation, which is surprising. One of the annoyances, I suppose you could call it, is the fact that you do have to manually enter your Wi-Fi connection. You do have a LAN internet port there on the side, as well as, which is surprising, you get two USB 2.0 ports and a USB 3.0 port. So what I've done with that is with the USB 3.0 port is once I've got the camera with the USB, I've plugged that into the side for the 720p onboard monitoring. So that still leaves you two USB ports. Potentially if you wanted to connect an external monitor, power that, and run the main board does have an external HDMI. I think it's a 1.2 or 1.4 input, so you can actually connect an external touchscreen instead of using the smaller 3.5-inch screen, which I'll pan down and have a look for you in a moment. We'll go through, which is handy because when the door's closed or you've got things printing, if you're not near your PC, you can potentially print a bracket and mount a nice size touchscreen where you can run your Clipper screen from there, which is quite handy as well. The touchscreen is a capacitive touchscreen, so it's not that fluent when you touch it with your fingers, although you can use your fingers. I just enlarge the font to make that easier. So from that, what I think we'll do is we'll dive into some testing. We'll do some print. We'll see how that goes. Now, one thing to mention, this does have a couple of preset printers settings. It has what they call the standard Benchy, and then they used to call it the Berserk mode. Now it's actually called the Violent mode. So yeah, Violent, it's interesting. So we'll bang some, I've got some filament back there. I think I might use some eSun high-speed filament for this one. We'll put that on there and we'll bang out these Violent Benchies. We'll do a time lapse and we'll jump back into it and go for the spec. So obviously we've gone into some issues, we've gone into some good stuff about the printer. Overall, it's designed very industrially, some heavy materials that have been used in the printer. Obviously you've noticed I've gone through some different things. I've touched on a lot of different things, including the extruder, the bed mechanism, the Z-axis, the platform, the build, the motherboard, the overall build volume, filament sensor issues, which I'm sure Kingroon's probably well aware of. I'm not sure why they haven't looked at that. Even having the side spool mount on the side there, which they do sell, it doesn't null and void the rear sensor, but it does take away from the fact that having the rear spool, the concept of having the side spool as opposed to the rear spool, I should say, is that you don't have to be behind the printer, especially trying to get access to behind the printer. That's really important because a lot of people who have these printers on desk spaces, office areas or workshops like I do, or even in like my new printing room, which I'm in the process of completing, where I've got steel racks, where I've got multiple printers rode up on them. you can't get behind the printer. So to have a side spool mount and still have that filament run out sensor at the back, you can't get your hands behind there. You can't even see where it is. There is no PDFE tube connectors. So that's one of the biggest concerns with this printer. As far as print quality goes, I'll do some close-ups in a minute. The bridge test, I was surprised. I've also got a bone collector. It's pretty cool, actually. Did print because I wanted to print something, not just some test benches like everyone does. You know, all the other channels. I nearly broke the test, torch test. A lot of printer reviews, they either talk about the concepts of the printer, they do some torture tests, they do some, fine detail tests to test the tolerance tests, I suppose you call them. And that's pretty much basically it. I mean, we don't buy printers to do torture tests. We don't buy printers to do tolerance tests. I mean, in the retail consumer market, are we actually using these retail commercial, semi-commercial, I suppose, retail I would call them, printers, not commercial printers, retail printers? Are we actually using these as an industrial business platform for tolerances that you would use? Industries I've worked in mechanical engineering, maintenance, mechanical fitment, even workshop materials, do-it-yourself tools and equipment, and even if you're, printing toys and characters, those aren't going to require, 0.01, 0.005 tolerances. I mean, to me, that's a waste of time. I mean, getting back to what I'm saying, so what I did is I printed the bone collector, and the bone collector has a lot of complexities, a lot of different variations in the print, so that it really pushes the printer in the spectrum of layer line width, layer variables as far as adaptive height meshing from the Orca Slicer profiles that Kingroon provide, as well as I've actually got my own profiles which I've improved and made even better. So if Kingroon wants to check those out, they can. I've improved the profiles probably at least 50% so that the quality is so much better. I also did I had to do it, which was the bed mesh first layer print, just to check the auto alignment with the new proximity sensor to how well it aligns itself to the bed with the Z offset to see what the layering issues were. With that, which I'll do a close-up in a minute, I did find that the automatic calibration did need quite a bit of adjustment. I had to do 4 passes on the bed due to it being too close to the bed and pushing out probably too little filament, and that's after I did the full 5-stage calibration process on Orca Slicer. Trust me, I know how to do that very, very well. I've been doing it for a long time and I'm very OCD about it. So I had the pressure advance dialed in, I had the flow rates dialed in. I did the flow rates 1 and 2. I actually did them 3 times because with 4 different filaments, because I wasn't totally happy, to fine tune that, to get the exact tolerances right down to, I think it was 0.927654, which Orca doesn't even allow you to put in. So I did the VFA, I did the temp tower things, all the basic stuff, and then I wanted to print something complex. So I did something that was a internal, external frame, flexi print, massive amounts of variations in line width and things like that. It turned out really well. It did take a lot of tuning, but I have to admit the Kingroon KLP1 230, and the reason why I say it's V2 is because the 230 came out and they still tweaked it a little bit. It came through with pretty good results, I have to admit. I've got the K1 Max, I've got the improved K1C, I've got some bed slingers there. I've got a Flash Forge Adventurer 5, so amongst other printers as well. And this thing, I have to admit, although it does have some grievances, it provided. So I'll show you those prints in a minute. The Violent Benchy, which I'll go into a minute, I was surprised. The Violent Benchy, I used high-speed eSun filament, that you saw in the time lapse. The black Benchy was just the standard fast Benchy, and you'll see on the close-up, the black Benchy I used just standard Creality CR black PLA, just regular speed. I think it's a top speed of 120. It has a few under extrusion, I suppose, layer width inconsistencies, not many, but to most it's probably very, very good. I've seen a lot of other people post material, content, and say that, you know, oh, that's great, you know, I'm a bit more OCD than that. But the thing is, it actually came out pretty well. High speed, the Violet one wasn't much different, is in the fact that it actually, the material I used was a matte PLA, and the reason why I used a matte high speed PLA is because the matte high speed PLA really shows the deformities, because although most people think the gloss does, it's a semi-satin. What it actually does is it actually reflects light in a different way, so you can see not just layer lines, but you can see the depth of the print as well, so that was good. This one here I did a ghost ship, which I'll zoom in a sec, and this was the really cheap filament I picked up. It was a kilo for $14 Australian, which was really cheap, and I was surprised at how well it did that and the torture test. But I'll do some close-ups of that in a sec. Alright, so here we are, we've got the test prints as I said I'd show you before. To start off with, we've got the torture test, as you can see there. What I was really surprised about, like I did say, it does print really well. Unfortunately, I dropped the model before and bent this and broke that part. It's not a big deal. Not a big deal. That's okay. But anyway, as far as the bridging is concerned, as you can see, I'll just pan it over there for you like that so you can see that. Overall, it's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. Like I said, I did have some first surface and top layer issues, but apart from that, the bridging, it did really, really well. All the cylindricals, the tolerance inside, the detailed writing. The bridging on the overhang test did right up to 80 degrees, which was really, really good. As you can see there, 80 degrees. And then all the way underneath, if I reverse it, you can actually see that there's not much stringing at all in the bridging. So the fan cooling system and the ceramic extruder, or HotEnd I should say, is a really good system that KLP1 230 has. So that has been significantly improved. To be perfectly honest, with a overhang and 3D printing test like this, I've seen a lot of other high performing printers not even be as acceptable as this. So hats off to Kingroon 3D for that. That's really, really good. As far as the Benchy is concerned, as you can see, I thought I'd do something different, and I did a 200 scale ghost ship, which is pretty cool. I'm actually going to paint this. It was done with the cheapest filament I could find, which was a roll of filament I'd never heard of that I got given to me that was over 3 years old, and it was really dry, matte filament. Why did I do that? Because I wanted to see how good it could print with the worst filament, which is always a good test. So that's that. You can see there's a bit of stringing and stuff, not stringing but layering lines, but that's more to do with the filament. As you can see, the inside details, there's even a little man inside there sitting in the back corner. It actually did a pretty good job, so I was pretty happy with that one. The Violent Benchy and the Fast Benchy. The Violent Benchy I used with eSun high-speed filament, and as you can see just in the light there is some layering issues, but quite honestly, being a Violent Benchy, which you saw the time lapse in, to be honest, it's performed probably better than some other printers I've had in the past that have done benches that have taken 45 minutes. So that's a plus for a Violent Benchy, which was ridiculously fast, was really good. This other Benchy here was the Fast Benchy. I didn't do the normal Benchy because it was more of a case of to see what the quality was like at high speed, which is what corexy printers are for. There are some layering issues there, but I did this with standard PLA from Creality, and that turned out quite well. Actually, this was PLA plus matte, so yeah, it was a slower speed filament, but it performed quite well. Now, if you just hold 5 for a second, basically I'm going to show you the magnificent print that I did, that I have to admit is amazing. We'll get you to pan back a little bit. If we just step back a little bit so we can see the whole thing. So basically what we've got here is a bone dragon. Now I printed this bone dragon, which is really, really cool. And the reason why I printed this is because it has so many different variables in layer height. It has tolerance tests by the joins that it has to print inside. It has variable layer width within the skeletal wings. You can see the skulls, the chains that go around, the flexi tail at the back, which it printed absolutely beautiful. This was only done in 0.16, believe it or not. So not 12, 10 or 8. So that was pretty impressive. Everything's fluidly moved. You're probably thinking, how did I print something this big? Well, it was printed in components, so the body itself and then the wings were printed separately and then clipped on, as well as the tail section followed by the head. It did take, I think it was about 19 hours all up to print it, but I was pretty happy with it. Now, the other thing you can sort of see or not see is if you zoom in on the inside of here, you'll actually see there's some details of a body that the dragons consumed and some bones, which is pretty cool. It was able to print that internally with no supports, mind you, absolutely zero supports on this model, with excellent bridging. So I'll give hats off to Kingroon 3D for that, because with no supports, it's very, very impressive. So very, very happy with that. So this is going to be a model that I'm going to paint and I'm going to hang from my printing room, in my print room where all my printers are, because I think it's going to look absolutely cool. So that's the printing print. Basically what we got here is we've got a really good printer that prints well with calibrations done correctly. What we do have as well is we have a good build that's structurally sound. We have some improvements done from the 210 with a slightly bigger build volume. We have a different extruder which has been improved, as in the gear mechanism's been improved, so you get a better flow, feed rate, and less under extrusion and over extrusion, which is good as well. The motherboard's been improved, which is great to see. The clipper functionality is great. Like I said, it does need a stylus, although I did find by increasing the icon size, it is reactive with your finger touch, which is quite well. Isn't the best capacitive touchscreen, I would have to admit, as far as flow and touch sensitivity, but you know, it's passable for what it is. It is a conservative, budget-minded, priced corexy printer, so you know, you have to give it that. But like I said, main concerns for me is the industrial aspect of the printer, as I brought up before on the screen as I was talking about things, is that I feel, for instance, when you do the VFA and resonance tuning, it is that violent in its resonance tuning. I'll just take these models off for a second so I can explain something. That when you actually turn around and do the resonance tuning, this thing does resonance tuning like I've never seen a printer do a resonance tuning. Now, in fact, I might even just do it now because, you know, why not, as they say. Let's just give it a crack, because honestly, there is no other way of explaining it to anyone without actually doing it, because I will kid you not, this is something I've never seen before in the input shaping. So if we do it now, all right, so we're going to do now, we're going to do the resonance. Now I'm going to hold it because the table's not that great. Now this resonance input shaping tests the vibration of the machine and compensates for that. Now what you're going to notice, I'm going to move the mic to the machine so you can hear this. Because the machine, I'm going to have to speak a bit louder, because the machine itself doesn't have any rubber inlays. So what I mean by that is there's no rubber interlocking. You can see that rubber strips. They're 0.5 millimeter adhesion strips that basically, you can hear that winding up now. Now basically they're 0.5 millimeter strips in 10 and 20 mil width, and there's none of those layers between the metal touching. Now this is getting extremely loud. Now, kid you not, this is a major issue for me with this noise level. Now, as you can see, if I close the lid and I push on the panels, it gets a lot more tolerable. But there is still a massive amount. There you go. So if I actually, most of the noise, so that's acceptable. That's what you're hearing now. What you're hearing now is what you'd normally hear from a printer. Now, you'd normally hear that sort of dulled out buzz sound from a corexy printer. When there's rubber lined insulation, or not insulation, but lining in between each sheet of metal or plastic materials, that the side panels, top and bottom panels actually mount to the frame. Now that's not being done. On top of that, the actual perspex material used for the door and the lid vibrates so much because it doesn't have those rubber absorption pads. that it's actually vibrating it, even with me holding the panels. Now, you can see as I push on the side panels, it's a lot better. If I release this, even without opening the door, it gets to the point where you think it's going to self-destruct. I mean, you heard it before. It's as simple as these little strips here. They literally cost, for a 30 centimeter strip, they literally cost 99 cents. Now, there you go, so you can hear it now. They cost 99 cents. So to line this whole machine in these adhesive absorption rubber urethane strips would cost next to nothing to improve the overall quality user experience. And that's what it's about. It's about the user experience. Because if it's not for the user experience, then why are we printing? We're printing because we want to print things. We want to have a relatively, relatively decent printer that we can afford within our budget that provides us with what we're after, whether it's, characters, toys, DIY tools, whatever we're doing, household products, odds and ends, replacement repairs, it doesn't matter. Now, this machine, don't get me wrong, it can print a lot of materials. It's got the little extruder that's a little bit smaller than some other ceramic extruders that I've seen in the past, as you can see there. Now, it's probably about 20% smaller than some of the Bamboo Labs and Flashforge and Creality ceramic hot ends, which is fine. It's a smaller build volume plate. It doesn't require as much. It does heat up fast. It doesn't have a problem extruding well, which is fine. Now that's just completed, thankfully, because that was getting very, very noisy. I'll just clip my mic back on. So yeah, look, that is the biggest concern for me, is the shortfalls of a company that has the potential to provide printers that are really good. I mean, there's components in here and the way they're designed that are fabulous, but there's some small shortfalls like the rear filament sensor mounting system, the cable tie on the top of the extrusion mount that is there to prevent the actual the hot wire that powers the PCB board and the whole extruder mechanism and circuit from basically rubbing and wearing from bending and moving through the core movements to the point where the wires eventually break away. That's a shortfall. I mean, that can be fixed with, design implementations, even just an ASA or ABS tube that then that heat extrusion electrical coating that follows through that cable. Those little things can be fixed quite easily. Putting mounting blocks, so just simple square or even a rectangular strips along the side that you could even just screw in. I mean, I can't even count off the top of my head, but we've got at least 18 screws, hex screws on the top, 4 more on either side, and one block at the front. And what that's going to do is it's going to lift that up about, let's say, half an inch and prevent that from pressing down on that. So these are very, very, very cheap improvements that could be produced really, really easily. Now, if Kingroon wants any feedback from this, I'm happy to give it to them and explain in further detail if I'm not sure exactly the reference points. But obviously, things like the filament extruder, which I said, you can swap it out for some other filament the sensor. And then you could get an actual extension cable and adapt it. And because it is a steel frame, I do admit you can pilot drill some holes. This does make the things that this does and doesn't have, does make it the machine that if you want to tinker with it and you want to improve it and spend a little bit of money on it, not a lot, but a little bit of money on it, if you want to get the 720p camera, the LED light, which I mounted with some double-sided adhesive, and then the cable was hanging loose, so I had to tape that inside. It doesn't have a switch to turn it on and off. It's just basically hot wired to the power supply, so it's constantly on. So just I could have wired it with a switch, but then that's just more work again, which I don't have the time to do. So look, it's not a pitfall. Would I buy this printer? I probably would. If in the future though, as I become more busy, well, I already am busy, to the point where I'm got too many projects on that I'm struggling with content, that I can't get it out fast enough, that with something like this, I I didn't get this one out as a print review as quick as what I should have or could have. And the reason why is because I wanted to really, I suppose, question this printer. And not in a bad way, but I wanted to question it as if to say, why? Why can a printer that prints this well have the shortfalls that can be fixed pretty much on AutoCAD with some changes? I mean, the changes of from the perspex, or the material that they put in, the plexi material that they removed from the side and then changed it with panels. I'm not sure why they did that, as opposed to possibly there was even more vibration with the advanced tuning, because as you saw, even with the side panels being all metal, because it's metal paneling mounted onto a metal folded sheet frame. And trust me, I know these things because I worked as an acoustical engineer in metal sheet fabrication from CAD drawings for many years in my young days. I'm 44 now. From the age of 17, I worked as an acoustical engineering, making basically a lot of different acoustical components for military companies and industrial grade engineering. So I'm very, very familiar with the concepts of why and how these issues are caused, amongst other things. But that's one of the big things. Look, it's a one-off. You're not going to tune that all the time. It is very noisy. But when I first started, I literally thought there's something wrong with the machine. I'd never heard anything like it, but it was okay. I was like, calm down, Chris. So it's all good. But yes, like I said, it's just a simple thing. Having these rubber strips lined in between the frames, top and bottom, and obviously on the panels where all the bolts are. That wouldn't take, if you took all the panels off this, including the bottom, so it was just an open frame, just like a P1S, for instance, use that example, and from bamboo, literally you would just sit there, and if you had all of them cut to size, one after another, strip, just stick, you'd probably have it done in 10 minutes. It's that simple. And then you'd have a product that was, genuinely 70-60% quieter. You wouldn't have that problem with that tuning, that's for sure. And then having some blocks on the top and the front just to raise that up. You wouldn't need the cable tied to hold the power hot lead onto the PCB board, so that would no longer be an issue. You wouldn't even need to have people print lid risers, because there would just be no need. It'd be irrelevant. You would just save time. The consumer would save time. The company would save feedback. You basically, and I suppose one of the other things, so between just the vibrations of the paneling, the rear run-out filament sensor, and the hot cable and the extrusion, the only one other minor thing I can mention, well, it's not really minor, but I think it's to do with just the tolerances of the fitment, is the actual top of the front caging, which I'll put a photo here, is very close to the PCB board when you take the front fan cover off. It's just metal. So, for a small company, sometimes metal fabrication is actually cheaper than mass production in using other materials outside of steel construction, which I understand because I've been involved in that position before. So when you're a smaller company, having the access to sheet metal forming from fabrication is cheaper than having mass-produced components that are redesigned for fitment in other forms of nylon, plastic, and ASA and so on, or other polypropylene, whatever you want to call it, PC products. So the steel itself, it literally just the outer casing of the fan shroud could be 2.5 meters wider, and you'd still be able to use the same hex bolts and bolt that on, because when you actually pull it on, and I'll put the other photos, top and bottom, I'll put one of the extruder going on the PCB with the fan, and the other one's going to show that when you slide it on, you actually have to flex if you look at it from the front, the left side of the printer fan shroud, you actually have to flex that out to get it around the belt tensioning hex bolts that they're there to actually tension the belt. So you have to flex it out and then push it on, hold it in position, and then put the screws in. So what have we got? We've got the filament sensor, the riser on the block, the the VFA tuning and just some hot end features with a little, say, a riser and just some tolerances that need to be changed on the hot end cover. There is some prints out there that users have come up with on printables and Thingiverse and those sort of things. But quite frankly, I do believe, you know, this is probably the most raw, honest, in-depth review on the KLP1 210/230, and I say 210 because I've watched a lot of reviews on even the 210, and I don't think they've covered all the things I've covered. Now, I don't mind if my videos don't get advertised for company usage from the companies that I have dealings with. That's fine. I had the same thing with Creality as well, you know, but the user, then the public, need to know what they're getting themselves into, because if we can't trust the companies to know what we're getting, then the companies won't have a reputation to fall back on, and if they want to create a business long term and be profitable, that will fail because of that. Because at the end of the day, if the public consumer has problems with the products they buy, that equals a negative feedback on the company's business profile and the products they produce. And what does that do? Drive sales down, and therefore the company cannot thrive, it cannot increase sales, it cannot grow, and it cannot produce better products. So my goal with this channel has always been to not only be honest, but be raw. As you can see, I don't have a flash backdrop that looks like a kid's playground with flashy computer little lights and, you know, toys in the background, retro designs and a mic and a camera person or a wife or anything like Laura Moses. I mean, Laura Moses didn't even cover anything that I've covered with the KLP-230. Now, in my professional opinion, I wouldn't even call that a review. Now, you could say, why am I saying that about another YouTube content creator that does printer reviews? Quite simply, I'm just saying that because I'm comparing it to the fact of what I do, and that is give integrity, honesty, and respectability for the consumer and the public, and then feedback to the company. Now, the feedback to the company is not always going to be great, but that's just part and parcel, because at the end of the day, if we don't provide the correct feedback to the companies that produce the products that we as the public consumers purchase, then many things are going to happen. One, the public's demand's going to decrease, the business is not going to thrive, they're going to have bad feedback, and, you know, influencers are going to do what influencers are going to do. They are not going to be honest, they're not going to be raw, because they want companies to send them printers. I'm not that type of person. I am going to stick by what I do. As an Australian, we wear our hearts on our sleeves. And what does that mean? A lot of the people, Chinese people in Asia that manufacture these printers, don't understand what that means. And what that means is we genuinely speak our minds. We tell it as it is. We don't sugarcoat anything, because that's the way we are. You know, I'm not an influencer. I don't want to ever be an influencer. The only thing I would be ever considered branded at is a KOL, which is a key opinion leader. And to me, that's probably more justifiable. Why am I rambling on about this? I think it's important. I think it's important that everyone knows this. So that's pretty much basically where that is. At the end of the day, Kingroon 3D have increased and produced a product I think is relatively good as far as printing is concerned. I think it really does print good quality prints, as good as the K1s I've got from Creality. I will say that, so props to Kingroon 3D for that. Pricing, I think, is a little bit up there if you compare it to the Flashforge Adventurer 5, products in a similar market like that, and the Two Trees and the Flying Bear, that are from other smaller companies in that same sort of market volume place. I think it's a little bit up there, but at the same time, it is a good machine. If you want a printer that's got raw clipper access, that you really want to make your own, by all means, get yourself a KLP1-230. You won't be disappointed as long as you realize what you're getting yourself into. Like I said, it doesn't take much to improve this machine, and if you do the things that I recommend with this machine, you will not be disappointed. The print quality you will get will be amazing. So without any further rambling on, I just wanted to get off my chest, because I really want people to understand that subscribe to this channel and follow my content, that there isn't anyone out there that's doing what I'm doing. I don't do content like other people, you know, and I think that's why the people who follow me, and the reason why I've got 20,000 plus subscribers today, only doing one video part-time previously as of only from November 2023, which I'm now turning into full-time. And that's why I've grown so fast, is because people recognize honesty, integrity, and, you know, when someone's genuine. And I know what it's like because I'm not endorsed. I pay for things that I have to pay for as well to promote or do or not promote in my channel. And I talk about things that other 3D print reviewers don't talk about. So, and that's what the public and the consumer really want. They want to know what's happening. They want to know what the product is. So that's why I got into this industry. KLP1 230 does print awesome prints. I will say that again. It does print awesome prints. Does have some shortfalls. Does need some improvements. But I think if Kingroon, I apologize for that, Kingroon, if I'm saying that correctly, does implement some of these improvements with this type of corexy machine, I think, you know, they can really start to play ball with the bigger players in the market, and I genuinely mean that to Kingroon themselves. And I'm more than happy to have a chat with them about the design and improvements if they want to collaborate on anything like that. They probably won't, but it is what it is. That's the KLP1 from Kingroon 3D-230 with some, you know, V2 updates there. I've covered pretty much everything I can think of to do with the ins and outs of this printer. It has been a long review, I know. Thanks for you guys for tuning in, supporting the channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you do like it. If you don't like it, that's fine. I'm not the channel for you. Yeah, like I said, you know, yeah, thanks to Kingroon 3D. Like I said, I don't have to thank them, but I purchased it from them, and I have been, you know, going back and forwards and communicating. They've been really good to communicate with. They're a great company from that point of view. So yeah, probably one of the better companies to communicate with. Check out their store. I'm going to post the Kingroon 3D store down below. They do stock a lot of accessories for very different printers, which I find very useful. They're priced very, very well, and they ship all over the world. So there's also a discount coupon that I'll put in the link below. Like I said, I will receive a small commission from it, but not much. It just goes towards helping me improve the content of this channel. It's not a big discount. I think it's like 4 or 5% off their sale prices, and that'll be in the description below. Code will be CC3D, so use that if you want to. Like I said, this is the KLP1 230 from Kingroon 3D. Thanks for watching, guys. See you on the next one.